In March of 2007, the entertainment world was shaken by a revelation that seemed ripped straight from the plot of a Hollywood thriller. Hollywood Truth magazine claimed to have uncovered the long-hidden secret journal of legendary actor Burt Lancaster. Known not only for iconic performances in films like From Here to Eternity, but also for his moral compass. He once marched alongside Martin Luther King Jr. Lancaster had left behind a final, shocking document. But it wasn't a memoir of triumphs or regrets. Instead, it was a list. 14 names, 14 towering figures of Hollywood's golden age, men and women the world had long revered as heroes, icons, and role models. Lancaster didn't write about their talent or their legacy. He labeled them the most ruthless people Hollywood ever produced, exposing a hidden side of the industry's brightest stars. From accusations of manipulation and abuse to claims of cruelty behind closed doors, his words painted a far darker picture of fame than audiences had ever imagined. If true, this journal wasn't just the confession of a disillusioned man. It was a curse left behind, a warning to future generations about the dangerous price of power, fame, and unchecked influence in Hollywood. Marilyn Monroe, immortalized as the fragile blonde bombshell of Some Like It Hot and The 7-Year Itch, remains one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces. To the public, she was the tragic starlet whose vulnerability made her unforgettable. But according to Burt Lancaster's secret journal, this fragility was no accident. It was a weapon. Monroe, he claimed, was not merely a victim of the system, but a disruptive manipulator who used her charm and carefully staged breakdowns to control everyone around her. Lancaster recounted that during the filming of Some Like It Hot in 1959, Monroe would vanish from set without warning, leaving directors, co-stars, and crews waiting for hours. These disappearances weren't simply the result of stress or illness. They were deliberate acts of power. By forcing productions to halt until she chose to return, she reminded everyone that nothing could move forward without her. Lancaster wrote that she wielded her image of fragility as a shield, turning chaos into leverage. Her manipulations, however, extended far beyond film sets. Monroe allegedly used her relationships with influential men, including producer Jack Warner, to bend decisions in her favor. Lancaster claimed that when Warner suggested she work with another actor, she staged a dramatic emotional collapse, forcing him to comply with her wishes. To Lancaster, this was not the behavior of a powerless woman, but of a cunning strategist who understood exactly how to twist affection and pity into tools of control. In the journal, Monroe's legacy was stripped of innocence. She was not remembered as a helpless victim consumed by fame, but as a force of disruption, someone who bullied, manipulated, and deceived to secure her place at the top. To Lancaster, Marilyn Monroe was less a tragic star and more a black hole, an unstoppable pull of greed, chaos, and control. Natalie Wood, remembered by the public for her delicate beauty and haunting screen presence in films like West Side Story and Rebel Without a Cause, carried an image of fragility that captivated audiences around the world. But in Burt Lancaster's secret journal, this image was described as nothing more than a mask. Behind those sorrowful eyes, he claimed, was a cunning strategist, a master manipulator who used charm, deception, and theatrics to bend Hollywood to her will. According to Lancaster, Natalie Wood wielded manipulation as an art form. On one occasion, she allegedly staged a fainting spell in the middle of a film set, halting production for 10 hours. The reason? To pressure producers into firing a co-star she disliked. In Lancaster's telling, this was not an isolated act, but part of a larger pattern. Natalie allegedly cornered fellow actors, staged breakdowns, and created chaos, all to ensure her own power remained untouched. She built a culture of fear, where colleagues knew that crossing her could mean career ruin. The most chilling claim from Lancaster's journal was his suggestion about her tragic death in 1981. While the world mourned the mysterious drowning that took place aboard a yacht off Catalina Island, Lancaster hinted that it was not merely an accident. Instead, he suggested it was the inevitable consequence of years spent weaving webs of deceit and manipulation, enemies finally catching up to her. Weeks before her death, a journalist reported that Natalie had allegedly threatened to end the career of a close friend who refused her demands. Lancaster wrote that the sea didn't kill her, it only hid what she left behind on shore. To him, her demise wasn't just a tragedy. It was the haunting final act of a life built on fragile illusions and ruthless control. Errol Flynn, the swashbuckling star of Captain Blood and the Adventures of Robin Hood, embodied the ultimate Hollywood hero. With his dazzling smile and effortless charm, he became the very definition of adventure and romance on screen. But according to Burt Lancaster's secret journal, behind the glamour and legend lay something far more sinister. Flynn, he wrote, was not merely reckless. He was a predator who weaponized fame, wealth, and charisma to exploit and destroy those around him. Lancaster claimed that Flynn's notorious private parties were not harmless Hollywood excess, but dark spectacles where drugs, escorts, and violence blurred into disturbing rituals. Guests were allegedly coerced into submission, while victims were silenced by the sheer power of Flynn's influence. Lancaster suggested these gatherings were less about indulgence and more about control, leaving behind scars no one dared to speak of publicly. Even when the law caught up to him, Flynn's reputation and connections allegedly ensured he faced no lasting consequences. Lancaster pointed to an arrest for drug trafficking where Flynn, instead of facing justice, walked free within hours, protected by his untouchable status. He would then resume his destructive habits, untouched and unrepentant. For women who crossed his path, Lancaster described them as disposable, valued only for what they could offer in the moment, then discarded once their usefulness ended. To the world, Flynn was a golden icon of Hollywood's adventurous spirit. But in Lancaster's telling, he was a monster without boundaries, a man whose charm was nothing more than a mask for predation. The image of Robin Hood may live on in cinematic history, but Lancaster's journal painted a far darker portrait. Errol Flynn not as a dashing hero, but as a dangerous figure whose real-life adventures left behind fear, ruin, and silence. Kirk Douglas, remembered by millions as the heroic face of classic Hollywood, was celebrated for his dazzling performances in films like Spartacus and Champion. Yet, according to Burt Lancaster's secret journal, the man audiences saw on screen was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. Behind the charisma and rugged good looks, Lancaster described Douglas as a predator beneath human skin, a man who thrived on power, intimidation, and manipulation. He was not content simply to dominate the box office. He allegedly sought to dominate people as well. Lancaster claimed that Douglas abused his influence to punish anyone who dared defy him. One chilling example involved actress Lisa Avery, who in 1959 was abruptly removed from a major project. Her only crime, according to Lancaster's account, was rejecting a private dinner invitation from Douglas. This, he wrote, was no coincidence, but a calculated act of revenge. Just one example in a long chain of punishments Douglas used to protect his position. But the accusations did not stop there. Lancaster alleged that Douglas wielded illegal substances as weapons, using them to manipulate directors, producers, and co-stars into compliance. Those who resisted faced brutal consequences: removal from projects, reputational sabotage, or even dangerous situations where silence became the only option for survival. In Lancaster's eyes, Douglas wasn't just a flawed man with personal demons. He was a ruthless enforcer of his own empire, willing to destroy anyone who stood in his way. To the world, he was a larger-than-life star, a man who embodied strength and courage. But in the journal, Lancaster stripped away that myth, leaving behind a portrait of a predator whose hunger for power turned Hollywood's golden dream into a nightmare for those caught in his orbit. Elizabeth Taylor, the violet-eyed beauty who captivated the world in films like Cleopatra and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, remains one of Hollywood's most enduring icons. To the public, she was the epitome of glamour, graceful, radiant, and larger than life. But according to Burt Lancaster's secret journal, the legend of Elizabeth Taylor concealed a storm. Behind the dazzling jewels and cinematic triumphs, she was painted as a master manipulator who used tantrums, intimidation, and calculated relationships to bend Hollywood to her will. One infamous story came during the 1962 production of Cleopatra at Cinecittà Studios in Rome. Lancaster alleged that Taylor locked herself in her dressing room for 14 hours, refusing to work simply because a co-star wore a dress in the same color as hers. When the director finally pleaded with her to return, she reportedly hurled a glass of wine into his face, leaving the entire crew stunned. This, Lancaster wrote, was not an isolated moment of vanity, but a deliberate tactic, using chaos to remind everyone of her unmatched power. Taylor's influence, however, stretched far beyond film sets. Lancaster claimed her marriages, from Mike Todd to Richard Burton, were less about love and more about leverage. She allegedly used these unions to control careers, extract wealth, and sway Hollywood's most powerful producers. To Lancaster, her romantic life was a series of transactions, each one designed to strengthen her grip on the industry. In his journal, Taylor was not the fragile woman the press often portrayed, but a calculating force who orchestrated her world with precision. She knew how to wield beauty, fame, and fury as weapons. To the world, Elizabeth Taylor was a queen of Hollywood. To Lancaster, she was its storm, an unstoppable force who ruled through manipulation and control. Mickey Rooney, the boyish star whose boundless energy lit up classics like National Velvet and the Andy Hardy series, was once Hollywood's symbol of charm and optimism. With his warm smile and playful spirit, he embodied innocence on screen. But according to Burt Lancaster's secret journal, that image was nothing more than a mask hiding a much darker reality. Behind the scenes, Rooney was described not as a lovable entertainer, but as a verbal sadist who thrived on humiliation and control. Lancaster claimed that Rooney often targeted the most vulnerable on set, background actors, costumers, or crew members, mocking them openly in front of others. Something as trivial as a hairstyle or a misplaced wardrobe piece became ammunition for his cruelty. He would watch with satisfaction as his victims broke down, smiling as though their suffering gave him some twisted victory. Yet, it was within his personal life that Rooney's alleged cruelty became most disturbing. Lancaster wrote of marriages that resembled battlefields rather than love stories. He claimed Rooney treated his wives like servants trapped in their own homes, using fear and violence to enforce obedience. In one shocking account from the 1970s, Rooney allegedly slapped his wife on a film set for being behind schedule, an act that left her physically and emotionally scarred. For Lancaster, Rooney's long list of failed marriages wasn't evidence of romantic misfortune, but a chilling record of abuse repeated again and again. Each relationship, he suggested, revealed a pattern of control, intimidation, and destruction. To audiences, Mickey Rooney will forever remain the cheerful entertainer with the infectious grin. But in Lancaster's journal, he emerges as something far more sinister, a man whose public joy concealed a private reign of fear, leaving scars that outlived the applause.